Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And I got a big old jug of Gatorade, so I'm good to go this week.
I'm not. It's baffling how unfunny I feel today.
I think it's understandable. I told myself, I'm going to try to avoid. We've been starting with this heavy socio-political talk every week because how can you not with everything going on? And then things since the last time we recorded have really
went up a notch. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want to get into. I do, and not from a it's not our place to talk about blah blah blah. But I think from a personal standpoint, I need a break from it because basically I've been doing nothing but complain about it. And
I mean it's kind of interesting. This is probably the least active I've been on Twitter as far as me personally posting anything. I just throw up a joke occasionally when I can think of one. But for the most part, it's kind of interesting how that whole social media platform has shut down and has kind of become the only place where you can get any kind of reliable information about what's happening in the country.
And I agree, except for with the caveat that not everything on there is reliable.
Right. But nothing, nowhere else does it feel reliable.
Right.
So occasionally you get people, at least you're getting footage of people who are involved,
Yeah, which you turn around and when you see it out there and other venues are saying, oh, that didn't happen. You're like, I'm watching it live, with my eyeballs right now.
Yeah.
I say, whatever. So, yeah, like I said I wouldn't go into that, but I agree with you. I mean, it was very hard for me. I've got a topic that I like and I think it'll be good. But we've always talked about, at least for the second half of these episodes that we've done, how it's getting harder to find topics just because you run out of stuff. But this week it was hard because it was just hard to care about anything.
Right. There's a lot of podcasts right now who are just we're not putting out an episode this week. And what's tricky about our fucked up show is we record on Thursdays and release it on Tuesday. So we're in the spot where next week it'll probably be an okay time to put up a new episode, but we have to record it now when there's so much other shit going on, and it's really tough to really give a shit. But
on top of not caring, and then half the type of topics that we talk about, I do a lot of older history, military topics. It's that doesn't feel appropriate right now, even if it has nothing to do with what's going on. It's I don't really want that stuff. But like I said, I did find something that I think will be good if I can flip back to my notes here. So the two things that we do love to cover on the show are stories of supernatural, ghost stories and stuff, and stories of murder.
Yeah.
And conveniently, a lot of time, one of those stories leads to the other because they tend to come together. So, toiling at work one day in 1897, blacksmith Edward Shue asked the neighbor boy to run to his house and ask his wife if she wanted him to pick anything up from the market on his way home from...
While toileting at work. While taking a big poop at work.
Big dump.
He shouted, "You the...
neighbor kid! Go home!
You there, boy!
See if she needs anything from...
You there, boy! I need toilet paper. Run back to the home and get my wife to get a couple rolls."
So the boy did as he was told, but when he knocked on the door, nobody answered. He did what anybody would do and let himself in.
Kicked the fucking door in and said, "Wife,
woman,
your husband needs to know if you need him to run errands."
As his eyes adjusted to the room's dark interior, he could start to make out the outline of a figure laying on the floor at the base of the stairs. Maybe she's just asleep, he literally thought.
All right, he killed her. The story doesn't check out at all.
Miss Shue, are you sleeping or are you a dead body? He asked nervously. I may have taken some literary liberties here when I...
And she said, "No, I'm not a dead body at all. I am the dog."
So when the woman failed to answer, the boy panicked and ran from the home. It never said how old the boy is, so I'm picturing a young kid, but it could have been a 19-year-old. Who knows?
You there, boy. He's 33 years old.
Yeah.
Right. Quick on me, boy.
Maybe his last name was just Boy. Like, he was Adam Boy.
Yeah, his name was Big Boy.
He raced home in his suspenders. He raced home and told his mother what he had seen, and she immediately called for Dr. George W. Knapp, who was a certified expert in telling the difference between a sleeping person and a dead one.
I want that job. I can guarantee you I can spot the difference.
I don't know. There's a number. This isn't where this is going, but there's a number of stories that I've come across over the years of people that are like, yep, they're dead. It's like they're snoring or actively snoring. They're like, nope, this person's dead. Bury him.
Quick, bury him, because I don't... They'll come back and full of horrors if you don't.
But anyway, they called for the doctor/coroner. Unfortunately for Mr. Shu, and unfortunately for Mrs. Shu, who was Elva was her name. She was indeed dead.
Her name was Elva Shu?
Yeah, Elva.
Elva? Okay.
However, George Knapp, the doctor, was quite late in his appointment, and so by the time he arrived, Mr. Shu had already returned home. Upon finding his wife's body laying deadly on the floor, Google decided to side me out. Anyway, he returned home and he found his wife laying on the floor, and he did what like any husband would do in that situation. He carried her body up to the bedroom, washed her body, and prepared her for burial by placing a dress with a high-necked collar and a veil on her. So, yeah, it's not suspicious at all. If I came home and found, like, my family murdered, I'd be like, oh, no, I better dress them up nicely for this funeral.
Like, what Edgar Allan Poe shit is that? Or it's like, well, I just discovered this. Time to get her ready.
You know how, like, some people have emergency preparedness kits down in their basement? They have, like, canned food and radios and batteries and flashlight. He just had, like, a box of funeral clothes, like, just in case it happens. He's like, oh, no, but at least I'm ready for it.
That would be a pretty bad widower in that case, because I would just like, well, I'm not going to dress her up, because that's a lot of work, but here's some of her favorite things. I'll put them on her, and then I'll wrap her in her favorite blanket, like a big dead burrito.
Do I just put her out with the trash? Because it doesn't come till Tuesday. Like,
seems wrong. Maybe if I just like prop her on the couch.
So, despite Mr. Shu already performing the services of both the coroner and a funeral director, Dr. Knapp decided to have a go at examining the body anyway. He figured he came all that way, he might as well do his job. But that job was complicated by the fact that the obviously distraught and very recently widowed Mr. Shu sat sobbing while cradling his now former wife's head, but nevertheless the good doctor persisted. Finding no signs of trauma on her legs, arms, or torso, he attempted to examine the head and neck, but doing so seemed to agitate Mr. Shu, and so he concluded that since the rest of the body showed no signs of trauma, it made sense that the neck and head were probably okay, too.
The most vulnerable parts of the human body. Mm-hmm. But we can glance over that. Her fingernails are fine.
She even trimmed her toenails. Good for her. Sir, he finally proclaimed while completing the last flowery strokes of ink upon the death certificate, in my professional opinion, your wife has died from everlasting fainting. That's literally a thing that he wrote.
You should be embarrassed to be in that field and write that. You're a doctor.
It made me think, though, I mean, there are so many, like, unexplained medical deaths. I love that they had a term for it, and it was just a we give the fuck up term.
Yeah.
Everlasting faint. She fainted that she'll never come back.
It seems your wife has passed from being an eternal sleepyhead.
Everlasting fainting sounds like something that would happen at Willy Wonka's factory.
Sounds like something that would happen at, like, a rave or something. You take the wrong pill.
That's true. So Dr. Knapp apparently did realize how stupid he sounded, and he eventually would change the cause of death to complications from pregnancy. Although nowhere in anything that I read did it say that they ever confirmed or thought she was pregnant. It was probably just... I
wonder how many times that was just casually thrown on, like, a death certificate. Just say, like, there's dudes out there who died due to complications of pregnancy, officially. Actually, if a dude dies from complications of pregnancy, that's a very legit thing. And they said the wrong thing during a pregnancy.
Right, that's what I was thinking. I said there probably are a lot of guys that died from that.
Technically a natural cause.
So Elva was taken to her family home where she was buried after a mostly uneventful funeral. Uneventful aside from the way that her now former husband spent the entirety of the funeral pacing back and forth around the coffin, constantly making adjustments to her neck, head, collar, veil, and oddly mismatched scarf that he insisted on wrapping around her head and neck.
I think I know where this is going. And it's fucking sick.
You probably don't, but you might. He also kept propping her head up with various pillows and rolled towels. Of course, people noticed this, and, they were kind of saying stuff about it. But he explained that, the dress and veil he kept, fidgeting with because he wanted her to look perfect. And the scarf, although it clashed with the dress and did not make her look perfect, was her favorite and that she'd want to be buried in it. And the pillows and towels that he kept trying to prop her up with and kind of surround her neck and head area with were to make her more comfortable in death. So people certainly found the behavior suspicious, but Edward had been well known in the community and most people liked him. He had a good reputation. So despite noticing the odd behavior, he was given the benefit of the doubt and Elva was buried. But among those people who noticed his odd behavior was Edward's mother-in-law. Unlike most townspeople, and like most mother-in-laws, she didn't like Edward and never trusted him. She was convinced that he had murdered her daughter, and so she started praying every night after the funeral for her daughter to appear to her and tell her how she really died.
Right, that's usually step 3 in any homicide investigation.
Yeah, first you dust for prints, and then you get a donut, and then you start praying.
Dust for prints, see if anybody recognized anyone, and then praise the Lord. Yeah, she's come to me with answers.
Pray to a ghost. That's what's funny to me. It's like, what kind of weird prayer? Maybe she was praying to God for the ghost, but it sounded more like she was just praying out into the ether.
How do you pray for a ghost? That's like the kid running around town searching for friends, shouting friends. You just sitting in your room and ghost.
Well, for a month it didn't work.
No shit.
But then one night, presumably during a full moon and or eerie thunderstorm, Elva's ghost actually appeared. First she showed as a bright light, which then materialized in front of her mother's eyes. She explained that on the night of her death, Edward had become enraged when she had failed to serve any meat with dinner, which, in fairness, there was a point in my life where if somebody's like, here's dinner, and there was no meat, I'd probably fly into a rage too. And now we have dinner without meat all the time.
I know, your fucking Twitter account is half dad jokes and half pictures of couscous and shit.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I eat meat and I love meat. Hamburgers are my favorite food, but
you definitely have you're trying to do the right thing, and it's that the presentation of it is that fancy restaurant thing that drives me insane, where it's this giant white plate and there's maybe a 16th of it is some beef and then the rest of it is green shit. And it's
yeah, that's a health thing, but it's also a budget thing. Meat's expensive.
It is,
but so anyway.
But if you cut out all those greens, you could buy as many steaks as you want.
It's true. She didn't serve her husband meat, and so he strangled the hell out of her. Edward grabbed her by the throat and choked her to death, breaking her neck in the process. At this point, according to her mother, who was, of course, the witness to the ghost, Elva's head spun around in 360 degrees to emphasize the fact that the neck was indeed broken. Which I don't know what that proves. You're a ghost. You should be able to do whatever the hell you want because you're not, physically real, but whatever. Not to mention that that's not exactly how breaking your neck works.
Yeah, that's like breaking your neck as told by Looney Tunes.
Right. So this visitation repeated itself for 4 consecutive nights, and finally, Mary Jane, who was the woman's mother, decided it was time to go to the local prosecutor. as it turns out, the prosecutor probably wasn't super moved by the ghost story, being that they had failed to cover, paranormal testimony in law school. But her persistence was enough to get him to at least start kind of like looking into the death. And so when he asked the good doctor what his investigation had uncovered, the doctor, after presumably like awkwardly clearing his throat a few times, said, well, you see, I never actually examined her head or neck. It didn't seem that important given how rare it is to die from trauma to your head or neck. Then after interviewing various funeral guests and neighbors who all mentioned Edward's suspicious behavior, he did decide to order a full autopsy. It's like, something seems to be fishy here. So the body was dug up, much to the dismay of the husband. Although, in fairness, if my wife died and then suddenly they wanted to like dig her back up, I wouldn't be super happy about that.
I'd be stoked about it. I'd be like, cool, my wife's coming back.
Yeah, I forgot to take my wallet out of her purse before you buried her. I need that back. So she was dug up, and a subsequent autopsy revealed that Elva's neck had indeed been broken, or rather, the first and second vertebrae had been dislocated. There appeared to be finger marks around the neck, like finger-shaped bruises.
Yeah. What's weird is the bones seem to be stronger after this.
It's weird that they could find all this evidence on a body that had been buried a month, like back then.
Well, I mean, thinking also, like the, travel arc of this body is, it died and then it got put in a box. It's going to decompose, but like the actual structure of it isn't going to.
Yeah. But it was quite clear that she had been murdered, but none of it was evidence that could be indisputably linked to Edward.
I still think it was the boy. Edward was taking a shit the whole time, I know.
And depending on his age, I didn't read it. It sounded like, Edward was the main suspect, but there were some other, like I said, there was nothing conclusive, and there was enough that they weren't kicking his door down immediately. In fact, there was some suspicion surrounding the mother, given that she had known exactly how her daughter had been killed, prior to them digging the body back up. And it was also well known how much she hated Edward. So some people thought maybe she killed her own daughter to frame him, which seems like you must really, really fucking hate somebody.
You hate the guy more than you love your daughter. Yeah,
it's like, you're so bad for my daughter that I'm going to kill her and frame you.
Considering that he dolled the body up all cartoonishly and wrapped a fucking scarf around it and shit, though, that mismatched. I don't think you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to fucking put together it was probably a neck injury, and you don't need fucking a voice from the other realm to tell you that's how it happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, the way he was acting and the way everything went, you would, if you weren't distracted by the fact that you just thought he was weird, if you already didn't trust him and you already thought he murdered your daughter, the way he was acting would be, hey, there's something wrong with her neck. He probably broke it and strangled her to death, given that that's a very common way for domestic abusers to kill their spouses.
Yeah.
So it's not like, it's what's funny to me when people are like, that's suspicious. She knew how he did it. It's like, well, you're just fucking dumb that you didn't know how he did it.
I mean, it turned out to be right, but I mean, it's still, they had to look into it, but it doesn't, you don't have to be a fucking genius to, prove that.
Right. So, during the trial, the prosecutor brought up the autopsy and the testimony regarding Edward's behavior at the time of his wife's death and at the funeral. But his investigation had also found that Edward had a bit of a past that might prove to be more pertinent to the current situation. Edward had a first wife who divorced him while he was serving time in jail for stealing horses.
For breaking necks.
Well, yeah. After the divorce, she had told the authorities that during their marriage, Edward was often abusive and violent towards her. Probably more apt and more suspiciously, Edward had a second wife who had died mysteriously, which was, of course, mysterious given his third wife was now mysteriously dead. All of these things were brought up by the prosecutor, but he had decided that he probably should hold off on mentioning Mary Jane's visions of her dead daughter's ghost because that would of course, make her sound insane. Also, he knew the testimony would be thrown out anyway because it was testimony from a ghost, and much more damning in 1897, it was testimony from a woman. Unfortunately, the defense attorney had caught wind of the mother's ghost story, and he called her to the stand. He asked her about these visitations, and then presumably, like, kind of did one of those things where you, like, lean back in your seat with one of the, like, a big shit-eating, like, gotcha grin. Like, ha-ha! We're going to discredit this right here and right now. But that grin would quickly vanish as Elva's mother recounted the 4 visits from her dead daughter's ghost with such passion and vigor that the jury actually seemed to be believing it. Oh, for fuck's sake, he probably muttered before cutting his questioning short. But since he was the one that called the witness, and he was the one that asked the questions about the ghost, he also was not allowed to object to it. And since it seemed to be helping the prosecution, they certainly weren't going to object to it either. So the judge decided to allow the testimony to stand as evidence. So that, and probably that combined with the marks on her neck and the broken vertebrae and the crushed windpipe and the prior domestic abuse and the questionable death of his previous wife, was enough for the jury to convict Edward, and he was sentenced to a life sentence in prison. But the case of Elva Zona was her middle name, so that's even better. Elva Zona Heaster remains the best and hopefully only known U.S. murder case that was decided based, at least in part, from the testimony of a dead person. So that's my story this week. They actually have, like, at her childhood house where she's buried, there's like a, historic marker, and it talks about the murder. But it specifically lists that it's the only known case where, like, ghost testimony was accepted as admissible.
Probably a good precedent.
I'm glad we don't live in the 1890s.
Yeah.
I'm not that much more confident in our criminal justice system today.
Yeah, I think I would honestly, if I was on trial for some shit, I would probably I'd talk to my attorney and be like, is there a ghost defense here? Mm-hmm. That can, get me off. Because I think it's really how you articulate it, like anything in a courtroom.
That's what I love, and it'd be probably less helpful if you're the accused, but if you're trying to accuse somebody else, like, it's hard to refute the fact, if they're going to, like, take it, be like, yep, man, I wasn't sure he did it either, and then my dead daughter came to me and said, yeah, you're right, Mom. And I was like, well, shit, can't argue with a ghost. I wish you guys had been there to see it, but I promise it happened. Like, it totally doesn't read like she sat around for a month trying to figure out a way to get her son-in-law convicted. And then, like, it was like, fuck it, I'm just going to say I saw a ghost.
Yeah.
Although, like, there's a lot of things that go into that, because it's not... It would be more of a, like, non-essential cliche story if, like, it was clear that the son didn't do it. I think it's pretty clear that he did. So, it's kind of one of those, like, ends justify the means situations. And it sounds like he probably would have... Really what it sounds like it did was she came up with this story, or maybe she believed it. It would be very easy, too, if you're very distraught over the loss of your kid.
Especially if you're trying to talk to that kid every night for a month. Like,
right. And you're going, like, can you imagine how stressful... Well, I mean... Given current events, it's probably not that hard for a lot of people. It is when you know somebody did something terrible, but you have no concrete way to prove it, and nobody else seems to, like, be interested in like, investigating it. Like, it'd be very easy to have the mental break and actually, hallucinate a ghost. But what it seemed to do is it fired her up so much that she was probably just being really annoying, and the prosecutor's like, fine, I'll look into this. And then he started looking into it, and he's like, holy shit, these people are all fucking stupid. Of course of course the husband did it. Like, it's right there.
That's why I always take the law into my own hands when I know something wrong was done. Now, I'm wrong all the time. 100% of the time. I haven't been right about one case that I've gone back and tried to enact justice upon. But one day I'll be right, and the cops will be like, wow, you're the best detective on the force, Ben.
You gotta chalk it up to psychic abilities, though. It's like... You make 100 psychic like predictions, and one of them comes right. You can say, "Wow, look at that!"
Ben Matlock, Ghost Cop.
Ghost Cop.
Coming to
How
Fox.
shitty is it? Like you can see that the husband like planned this thing My guess is it really doesn't get into specifics because it's an older story. It is, like I said, it's a true story. The court case actually happened. The murder actually happened. It's not one of the, like, oh, it's been exaggerated by, fables and this and that over the, because there's really nothing that unbelievable about it except for how stupid everybody was until the prosecutor is like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But it sounded like he killed her the night before because they said when he served dinner, but he was at work when he sent the boy to check and see if she needs anything from the market. So my guess is he killed her, then the next day had concocted this plan to be like, oh, we'll send the boy to check on it so he'll be the one to discover the body because that's less suspicious than me being like, hey, my wife is just randomly dead while I was at home with her. But it was interesting to me that they then took the step to, like, rush home before anybody could do anything about finding the dead body and then be like, oh, well, the boy found it. Obviously, it wasn't me. So, I don't know. Although you could have been right all along. It could have been the boy. Like, this guy
no one's talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, he was known as the boy with the abnormally large hands.
With those neck-snapping paws.
Mm-hmm.
That was just a little nickname his dad gave him when he was little, and nobody ever thought it would lead to this.
He did go on to become the Mississippi Strangler, but...
You there, boy. Go fetch my wife and try not to kill her. With your giant meat bear claw hands.
Damn it, boy. I said don't kill her.
Why'd you try to give her a hug? You know what they do.
You got wax in your ears, boy?
And then the boy turns his hands upon him. He's like, no!
I'm totally picturing the that Foo Fighters video. I can't remember. I think it's Big Me.
Yeah, their hit song, Little Boy, Huge Hands.
Little Boy, Huge Hands. That's
Foo Fighters
the
track.
video. Yeah. I can't remember if it was Everlong or Big Me. It was one of those. But, whatever. So the moral of the story is if you kill your spouse, kill their ghost too. Like, perform an exorcism. Otherwise, that bitch is going to rat you out.
You have to kill her and then kill yourself and then kill her ghost.
Ghost. Yeah. I did it.
It's tough, but
or him. I mean, ladies, it works if you want to kill the husband too. It goes. It's gender neutral.
It's tough, but nobody said spousal murder was easy. You signed up for it.
I mean, apparently it is because it sounds like he got away with it like once before, at least.
No, at least a couple times.
It's interesting to me because they said he was well known and well liked. But everybody seemed to like. He must have been like very well liked. Well, I guess it was like the olden times. They're like, oh yeah, he's such a good guy. I mean, his wives keep dying, but he's nice. He made blacksmithy stuff.
He brought fudge every Christmas.
He ate most of it himself, but still, it's all.
He's at a fucking Christmas party, just like bring a giant plate of fudge, and then he just eats it himself in the corner. And he hisses at you if you try to have some.
Man, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, but it's always like kind of awkward when you show up to a party where you're kind of expected to bring something and you do, and you quickly realize what you brought's like the best thing there. You're like, I just want to eat my own stuff. You guys eat yours. Like, this is...
I don't know. When I'm in that spot, like, I if you're bringing something to a party, I want people to enjoy what I brought more than I want to enjoy it, usually.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I made the best. That's certainly
a way better situation than when you like bring something and then it's time to go home and you go to get your like container or whatever and you see it's like full. Yeah. It's like, oh, fuck you guys.
Yeah. What's awkward is if like you and someone else brought the same thing and they got to like compete. So it's like you brought a bean dip and Thomas brought a bean dip. And it seems like
although I cook a lot, I kind of like those situations because I usually win. But
you like to Iron Chef it up. See, I don't like that because it's right now the percentage is leaning probably 57% towards Thomas. So I got to do something to that fucking bean dip. Give myself an edge.
Oh no! Somebody spilled a beer in this bean dip.
Toilet bowl cleaner got all over it. Sorry, Thomas.
How did the cat get in there? Oh. No, I didn't put him in there. I don't know what you're talking about.
Wait, it tastes better? Fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember those days when you used to be able to have gatherings with other people?
Pepperidge Farm
Simpler
remembers.
times.
You remember those days when your friends could get together and eat toilet bowl cleaner with their bean dip? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Well,
yeah,
we're done.
We're done. Yeah.
If we haven't talked too much about it, but if you've been a part of those protests or whatever, they could still be going on by the time this episode goes up. They, probably should be, given everything wrong with the country. But if you're a part of them, stay safe. And yeah, hopefully we'll clear all this up. Just decades of fucking, if not centuries of issues, we'll solve in a week.
Yeah. That seems to... I'm getting that vibe a lot from the people that are in positions that are suddenly like, oh shit, I have to... And not just like politicians, and definitely not police departments, because they're just doubling down. They're getting very defensive, and it's...
Yeah.
Not going there here, but just from even corporations and stuff. And I love how much I give people a lot of credit for what they're doing right now to get a good message out, and mostly doing it the right way. But these companies are coming out and are like, yeah, we side with Black Lives Matter. It's like, you damn well better. And then it's like, but everybody's pointing out, they're like, oh really? It's like, well,
you also
what policies do you have currently in place that promote this philosophy? And they're all kind of like, oh, shit, we're being held to task to this? You're not going to just, at surface value, take our...
We here at Burger King support Black Lives Matter, and for that, we're going to institute a new policy where the king himself won't sneak up and scare black people. That's as far as it goes. It's just now get a chicken sandwich.
But I get the sense that a lot of people are scrambling. They're like, oh crap, what's the one platitude that we can do to solve this quickly? It's like, well, nothing can be done to solve it quickly. That's my hope, is that it's I certainly don't hope that these big protests go on. And when I'll say violent protests, but the violence, what side it's on, feels mostly not the protesters. Mm-hmm. But, that whole situation, I'm certainly hope that a year from now we're not still clashing back and forth in the streets and unarmed people getting gunned down by the cops with their quote-unquote less than lethal tactics. But the solution is not going to be something it's like, okay, well, tomorrow we come to this agreement, we're all done, let's move on with our lives. It'll be a long road. I just hope that this was the final straw to get those conversations going and keep them going.
Right.
I don't have a ton of hope that'll be the case. Unfortunately,
they're going to desperately
we're going through is the same shit that we've been going through for.
They're going to desperately get fucking sports going again and be like, get them playing, get them throwing a ball around.
I love so much that the 49ers posted we agree with Black Lives Matter, and it's important. It's like, oh, really?
I mean, every other team in the league is just as fucking on the hook for that shit. But yeah, it is funny.
Like I said, and I give people credit for taking them to task on it too. But like Ben said, the biggest thing is stay safe out there if you're out there.
It's a very I'm totally 100% with the protesters on this, but it is a dangerous situation. A friend of mine the best thing he tweeted, and this guy is, he does MMA. He's not afraid of conflict. In some ways, he was looking forward to this in some respect. But even he's like, the best thing you could be physically capable of doing in this situation is being able to run and knowing when it's time to run out of a situation that's getting dangerous. Because
unfortunately just being peaceful and complying is not doing it right now.
You're not and you're not good to the movement that you're trying to change if you're dead. So that's the only thing I wanted to say is just be careful.
And I guess if I had to add something, it would be So a lot of us, the thing that it's time for us to do right now is just listen, be able to admit when you were wrong about something, be willing to learn and to
I
make
didn't agree
better.
to that. Wait, I gotta eat humble pie too. Fuck this.
It's tough. I mean, you get on the one of the big things. It's actually become one of the more minor things right now because everything's so much more serious. Although you still keep seeing it, but the whole thing with you see Black Lives Matter, and a lot of us. If you're not black, your initial reaction is to get defensive and say, "Hey, wait a minute, all lives matter."
And that doesn't. Yeah, that's such a non. That rhetoric. Even if you don't realize it, that rhetoric just is to dismiss.
Exactly, and that's what I think. A lot of people that say that, I was when it came. What was it? 2013, I think, when it formed as an actual movement, Black Lives Matter, and that was kind of my initial thing. I was like, wait, that's not fair. And it's like, well, they're not saying.
Yeah. And
there's plenty you can, like I said, just keep your ears open and listen to why that's why people are so upset when you say that all lives matter. But the gist of it is, you're not saying that other lives don't, but we're not the ones that.
But you can't say. Someone phrased it really well. You can't say all lives matter until Black lives start to matter in this country.
Right.
You can't. We have to fucking deal with this shit. And every time you're like, well, everybody's important. It's like, yeah, everybody is important. That's why this group getting fucked with is something that needs to be addressed now.
Exactly. And even if, like I said, I think a lot of people, like it's your natural reaction because you kind of hear it differently. But I think most people aren't trying to be as dismissive, but that's exactly what it is. You're kind of shifting the focus away from what needs the attention right now. So, like I said, the key is just be able to admit that sometimes it's going to feel bad. Sometimes you're going to feel, we're not perfect. I guarantee.
Yeah.
I know I've said and done things that I'm like, oh wait, yeah, that was very insensitive.
Yeah, I will tell you, it is easier if you're not like go through this change of admitting you were wrong and do it off Twitter, because it's a lot easier to change your perspective about something serious when you're not checking your phone and getting like 50 people calling you a dumbass.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's
unless you're being just
especially
a dumbass.
I know it's human, especially in a venue like that. Especially if you're getting dogpiled, it's a natural reaction to get defensive, and you got to fight that.
Yeah, don't be defensive about it. I promise you, it's a bad look. You're gonna feel really fucking stupid whenever this is done. Anyway, yeah, that's all. I didn't want to harp on this too long because everybody's living in it right now.
Yeah, plus, like you said, by the time our show hits, we'll be in a new world order. I kind of have the way things are progressing. I'm guessing by Tuesday, like aliens will have landed and occupied most of the Earth.
Yeah,
super volcanoes will be going on. It just feels like you keep thinking, okay, that's ridiculous. How could this get any worse? And then it's like, hey, guess what? You woke up this morning and we made it worse overnight.
Yeah.
So keep your heads up, keep your chins up. It'll get better.
Keep your heads down and your chins up somehow.
Yeah.
Physically, that might not be possible, but work on it.
Sure it is. Just scrunch your face up like Popeye.
Just fuck your face up like Popeye with plastic surgery. So see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Toodles.